Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
And greetings. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, and we're here for another edition of Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours, for years, has been bringing you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. And today, rather than have a guest, I thought I would talk about a topic that has been really a call for this topic all over the country and, in fact, around the world. It's a very big topic. It's in debate. It has a lot to do with government influences, and it has a lot to do with health and something that you may not know about. And that is called GMO. GMO refers to food substances and other things, as we'll find out in today's show, that have been genetically modified. And you may have heard last year that there was a very, very big push and a vote to allow those foods which have been genetically modified to be labeled, believe it or not. In almost every country around the world, if you walk up to a shelf, you will see, let's say, zucchini, which is one of the genetically modified foods. You would see right on the shelf zucchini there, and one would clearly state non-GMO. That would mean it was not genetically modified. And the other shelf would say either GMO or raised with technical bioengineering. That's another way that they will say it. And lo and behold, the one that is labeled GMO sits there and rots for the most part. And the United States is the biggest promoter of genetically modified food. So one of the things that the companies such as Monsanto, and now, unfortunately, as we'll go into a little while, many, many more companies are getting into the genetic modified market. But one of the things that they talk about is that these two items, let's say corn, if we take corn that is not genetically modified and we take corn that is genetically modified, the powerful entities that are creating the genetically modified corn state that they are substantially equivalent. That term, substantially equivalent, is used to describe why genetically modified products do not have to be tested for their health effects. And more, there are various health effects which are coming to the forefront, showing that there's a lot of problems with these genetically modified items. Now, when they say they're substantially equivalent, they're saying that if you did a nutrient composition analysis, it would be identical to corn, in this case we're discussing corn, that is genetically modified, and corn that is not genetically modified. And the powers that be say, since they are substantially equivalent, there is no need to do any further safety testing, and they do not. However, several studies, this one was right in Scientific Reports, Volume 7, and this is a 2017 study, looking at the fact that Roundup is the pesticide that is hugely sprayed on genetically modified crops. Roundup caused an increased incidence in signs of anatomical pathologies, as well as changes in urine and blood biochemistry parameters, suggestive of liver and kidney function. This is a rat study that was just done. Another study that was done in Scientific Reports in late 2016 indicated that glyphosate, which is Roundup, tolerant genetically modified, was assessed, and it was found when they did a nutrient composition to be not substantially equivalent. In fact, there were many pronounced differences. Some of them were that the genetically modified corn had an increase in cadaverine and putrescine. Does that sound like things that you'd like to have more of in your diet? Cadaverine and putrescine? I would say not. However, it is true that you don't want a whole lot more of those. But in those corns, there was more in the genetically modified corn. So it showed that the molecular profiling results showed that those kind of products are not substantially equivalent. But of course, that research is being ignored. Another thing that the mainstream industry claims is that GMO crops decrease the need for pesticides which are linked to many illnesses, including increased cancer. However, that in and of itself is completely not true. In fact, if we analyze the use of herbicides and other chemicals such as pesticides, the use is vastly accelerating. In fact, from 2007 to 2008, there was a single-year increase of 31% increased use. That's huge. Also, there is a much more toxic player on the market. Many of you may have heard, and some of you may not have, when we talk about Roundup, that is called glyphosate. That has been linked to cancer. Another thing that's happening with the vast use of these chemicals, as so often happens, is that the plants and organisms that they're used against, in other words, they're used to kill various other plants, are becoming resistant to them, just like we hear about with antibiotic resistance. Well, there's herbicide and insecticide resistance. So because of the increased resistance to the original toxic chemicals so liberally sprayed on genetically modified crops, and that would be glyphosate, also called Roundup, now the people who bring us those wonderful chemicals have decided to add to the glyphosate a much more toxic chemical, and it's called 2,4-D. And the use of 2,4-D has increased by 237% in recent years. And just so you recognize that as well, perhaps you never heard of glyphosate, but you heard of Roundup because that's widely available even in garden centers. So perhaps you haven't heard of 2,4-D, but if I tell you the common name for that, you will recognize it, and it is one of the chemicals used in the toxic compound called Agent Orange. Perhaps you have heard of Agent Orange. Well, Agent Orange is now being used, a part of that chemical, which is 2,4-D, and is being sprayed all over our food crops if you are eating genetically modified food. And there is a vast array of studies. For instance, this one, carcinogenicity of 2,4-D, and this is in the Lancet Oncology Journal, and this is in August of 2015. So all of the references I'm giving you are actually quite current. So I'd like to remind you that you're listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, and today I am talking about GMO 2.0. So that study in the Lancet Oncology Journal, August 2015, specifically discusses how carcinogenicity is related to 2,4-D. So that means how much cancer is caused by the use of this specific toxic chemical. Okay? So this is not necessarily any new information for those of you who have been following pesticides and herbicides, but perhaps it's new that it is now being sprayed all over our genetically modified crops. By the way, if you buy food that is organic, it is not allowed to have these kinds of chemicals on them. So not only are plants being genetically modified, but we now have animals that are being genetically modified. Perhaps some of you have heard of the Aqua Advantage salmon, and maybe you haven't heard of it. But the Aqua Advantage salmon was developed by Aqua Bounty Technologies, and it's an Atlantic salmon. It can actually say Atlantic salmon on it, by the way, that contains a growth hormone from a different salmon that makes it grow at a much, much faster rate. It grows as twice the rate of Atlantic salmon, which means that costs production time and cost, so people can make more money when they sell it. But do you want to eat it? And how would you know if you're eating it? It is currently approved. It is currently on the market. And there is really no particular way, since they defeated the labeling law last year, which would have had labels on things saying GMO, non-GMO. Now, you might still go to the store and see things that say non-GMO, because luckily we were able to get a passage of some laws that allow companies to voluntarily label non-GMO or GMO if they want to. But if you were a company and you were non-GMO, perhaps you'd like to shout that out. But there's not one single company that's choosing to say that their products are GMO, since at this point in time, they are not legally required to say that they are GMO. So although you'll see some people saying non-GMO, that you'll see on some labels because they're very proud to shout that out, those companies whose items are GMO are not putting it on there. So it's your due diligence to look into it. So if you're going to purchase salmon, you might want to ask, is it farm-raised or is it wild? The only salmon you actually may want to eat would be wild salmon, because that is in the ocean, it's swimming around, it's eating its natural food source, it's exercising, so it's going to have the high level of omega-3 fatty acids that you would want from eating salmon. But if you're buying farm-raised salmon, it is fed a cocktail of many antibiotics, fattening agents, coloring agents, by the way, because farm-raised salmon's flesh does not turn orange. It would stay gray because of lack of exercise and that it's not eating its typical diet. So they force-feed it something that actually dyes its flesh an orange color. Doesn't that sound lovely? So you may want to ask whoever's selling you the salmon, is it farm-raised or is it wild? In addition, if it's farm-raised, it may or may not be Aqua Advantage salmon. And the Aqua Advantage salmon, in addition to being farm-raised, is genetically modified, the first genetically modified food animal to be on the market. Well, we'll take a little break right here on Herbally Yours and remind you that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can listen live or online at ncc.edu/WHPC. For more information on myself or our topic today or any other show that you hear on WHPC, you can email us at whpc@ncc.edu. Stay tuned. Herbally Yours will be right back.
Only in the forest can you see this. And this. And this. But nothing beats the moment you see that.
Cool!
That's your child's eyes opening up to a world of possibilities.
I didn't know it could do that!
Because one trip to the forest can spark a world of difference.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go, like hiking, canoeing, fishing, or camping. Or create your own